Hey everybody. Usually we kind of talk about more lighthearted stuff on the channel, or at least take a more lighthearted tone. But today we have something that's probably the most important topic that anybody could talk about, which is me. My name is Jake. I run the channel Alt-Worldly, and usually the audio is better, but I couldn't figure out how to get my cool, nice microphone to work with my webcam because I'm bad at what I do. So sorry about that. I'm making this video because I make videos on YouTube. That part you knew. So I'm a Jehovah's Witness, technically, but I have not believed in Jehovah's Witness doctrine for quite some time. I've been making YouTube videos for a few months now, but for most of my life, meaning all of it, I don't know why I said most, I was raised as a witness, always accepted it as the truth, never had a reason to think that it wasn't the truth. We call it the truth. I mean, that's a hint right there. If you say something 1,000 times a day for your entire life, you're probably going to take that as an affirmation. I was still a teenager. I was appointed as a ministerial servant. I served in a foreign language congregation for a while, Spanish, was a regular pioneer for a little bit, served on the LDC, did all the kinds of, assignments that ministerial servants do, got to give a lot of outgoing talks. That was a lot of fun. But I couldn't monetize them and put them on YouTube. So obviously I had to stop. I've made a few videos for this channel now, and I have not shown my face. But a couple things have changed for me. Partially, it's just the fact that my beard looks fabulous. My hair, you can all see my hair. I look great. But the main thing is I've reached a point where I've been really happy and satisfied in my life. When I first woke up, discovered that witnesses weren't the truth, I outlined it specifically in my video that I did before. It was a combination of a lot of little doubts about doctrine that kind of stacked up over the years, mainly relating to the fact that we gave ourselves as witnesses a lot of self-importance, going so far as to insert ourselves into Bible prophecy. JW broadcasting did not help anything. Hearing these things from the leaders themselves, particularly Garrett Loesch's broadcast, that was kind of the breaking point for me. It was in 2018, and he basically said to the camera, if you see stuff on the internet about us, the governing body, about me, Garrett Loesch, that's not real. And if you see it, don't show anybody, and don't believe it, because, hey, God, he believes us. Jesus is the head of the congregation. Jehovah trusts the faithful and discreet slave. That's me, by the way, and my friends. So if you see stuff about that, that's probably fine.
Satan also has the scheme to spread rumors about faithful brothers, including the faithful slave. Today, rumors are occasionally being spread in electronic form about the faithful slave. This has caused some concern on the part of some brothers, especially when the reports are commenting on court cases where some in the organization were accused. Sometimes reference is made to certain quotes, and readers then think,
how can a quote be a rumor?
A quote can be taken out of context. Critical reports often give only part of a matter and leave out other aspects. Often such rumors play on the emotions. Ask yourself, am I prone to believe rumors? And even if I am, should I spread it and undermine the trust that others have in the slave or in representative of the branch office?
And I just couldn't help but think, in any other context, if I was watching somebody say, hey, there's a lot of people that are disturbed by things about me on the internet. There's actually a lot of it, but none of it's true, so ignore it because God trusts me. The end. I, of course, would be skeptical. It's a combination of that and the organization's stance on LGBTQ issues, which is that no, they're not issues. Don't worry about them. They're very anti anything not straight, I guess is the best way to say it. And it always bothered my conscience, and I would just try to tamper it down. But the more I, would read books or watch videos or listen to podcasts featuring or created by queer folks, I couldn't pretend that they were in some way subhuman and not deserving of God's love the same way everybody else was. It was all those things that caused it all to come crumbling down. And I believe the beginning of this paragraph was when I first woke up, because of blah, blah, blah. When all that happened, I kind of went through the stages of grief in a weird vortex, in a blender. And I sort of started out with acceptance, which I would not have expected. I mean, when I first decided to just Google anything, which I went to NPR.com and looked up an interview with Amber Scora because I listened to Fresh Air and I'd seen that Terry Gross did an interview with a former Jehovah's Witness, and I was too afraid to listen to it, but I thought maybe I can read the transcript. That was the first thing I looked up, and my adrenaline was pounding. It was like I was walking into a bank, to rob it. I know from extensive experiences robbing banks that it feels exactly like Googling an interview with Amber Scora. But no, my adrenaline was pumping. I felt just kind of like that white hot flush of just adrenaline and fear, as though I was doing something illegal. And I just read a transcript to a Fresh Air interview, and my first reaction upon, after that, I watched the next JW5 interview, and I watched the Australian Royal Commission, and my first thought was acceptance. I remember consciously thinking, thank God it's not true. I didn't know that I had that sentiment in me. I didn't know that it was possible for me to feel that way. My entire life, I thought that I was living the best life ever, that there was no other way of living, that everybody else in the entire world was probably going to die at Armageddon. Not other than me, other than Jehovah's Witnesses. That would be crazy. But I felt relief. And the fact that I felt relief, the fact that I was so relieved that Armageddon wasn't really coming, I mean, that was a real tell. But after that, I really went into denial. At least denial about my inevitable circumstances. Like, hey, probably be shunned. It's not the truth, so I'll leave and I'll be shunned by my friends and family, and maybe it'll ruin my marriage, but that's tomorrow. Today, I watch YouTube videos and read books about evolution for the first time. But then a horrible, deep, dark depression sank in. I'm somebody who's lived with depression for a long time. I've had suicidal thoughts in the past. I have been through what I thought were dark times. Nothing compared to the depression that I felt after waking up and realizing that everything I had dedicated my entire life to was a lie, and far more significantly than that everybody that I knew and cared about and loved in my life also believed this lie. And because I didn't believe that lie, they would abandon me. I would lose everything. The one thing that I thought would be a constant in my life were my parents, the love and acceptance and line of communication of my mother and father. That's a constant. That's something you'll always have as long as they're alive. But once it hit me that I wouldn't always have that, most likely, I've never been more depressed in my life than when that hit in. And so went to therapy, had some, good revelations. Things were very difficult in my marriage for a while. This was the first time me and my wife had ever fought about anything. And they weren't even really fights, because what is there to fight about? I think that it's not the truth. She thinks it is the truth. but we love each other beyond this religion. So it took a while just to get to a point of peace. Um, and the reality is, I reached a really healthy place in my life. Mentally, anyway. Physically, I am in a very bad place in my life. I have had Crohn's disease since I was 8 years old. That's when I was diagnosed. I was sick for a few years before that. They didn't know what was going on. And right now I'm in the midst of what's called a flare. That's where my symptoms get really bad. Inflammation throughout my digestive system. I've had a lot of like bleeding and ulceration, and early on in the pandemic, I was actually hospitalized for about 5 days, and they found a stricture in my colon, a narrowing. That's something that will not ever get better. We just have to hope it doesn't get too much worse. Otherwise, eventually, I will need surgery. That's somewhat of an inevitability at this point. But one of the triggers for my Crohn's disease is stress. And I'm at a point right now where the only real stress I have is the hiding that I have to do. Having feelings that in any other context would be innocuous at best, but because I grew up in a high control group, these are earth-shattering feelings that I have to suppress from my friends and family. Otherwise, they'll kick me out like DJ Jazzy Jeff. Yeah, I've been really sick, and I'm getting worse, actually, despite mentally feeling in a really good place. And I've reached a point where I feel like I'm dying. I've never felt quite that bad before. When I was really young, when they were trying to figure out what was wrong with me, I would wake up sometimes. I had a lot of trouble sleeping because I had just horrible, like, stomach pains and stuff. I was always going to the bathroom, and I have a very distinct memory of waking up and kind of peeking downstairs and seeing my mom and dad crying about me, talking about what are we going to do. And, at that time, I felt really supported. I had my family, I had the congregation, and I have to say, the congregation was wonderful. They were very supportive. They brought us meals, they brought me presents. Nice as a JW to get presents because you're not getting the holidays, which I mentioned, and I should have mentioned this up top, but I in no way planned this or scripted it out. I love Jehovah's Witnesses. I love most of the witnesses I've ever met. There's a couple dinguses I've met over the years, but even the weird, quirky people are wonderful in their own ways, and so I always felt loved. Some people leave the organization because they realize how unloving it is. I never felt that way until now, when I realized how conditional the love is. The love is real until you disagree religiously, and then the love is very much gone. But of course, from their perspective, shunning is loving. Disfellowshipping is a loving arrangement. This is what's constantly reiterated. In fact, it's not even some organizational policy, it's Jehovah's discipline. So, anyway, I say that just to say I don't hold any ill will towards the witnesses, really, but I had kind of a revelation. Why the fuck did I mention all that childhood stuff? Just to be sad? I had sick a lot as a kid, and it was sad. I think my point was that I haven't felt this sick since I was a kid. It's at a point where I just feel weak. My inflammation keeps on getting worse. I have an immense amount of loss of blood, which is very concerning. And I'm doing everything I can do. Anyway, it started to get really bad in the summer. Obviously, COVID and everything was happening. I was fully awake at that point, but it was a horrible time to be hospitalized because you weren't allowed to have visitors. But leading up to that time, I was having blood loss. Not to get all TMI warning, but when I would go to the bathroom, it was just blood, dark red blood. And that's why I ended up going to the hospital. I had a fever, I had all this bleeding stuff. So I had to have a talk with my wife about, I need you to know something. I don't agree with the organization's stance on blood transfusions. Through the waking up process, I read JW Facts and learned so many things I had no idea about. The organization's stance on blood was something that always seemed like, the Bible says don't eat blood. And the reasoning that if a doctor said not to drink alcohol, but you injected it into your veins, that wouldn't be the same thing. I had never taken into consideration the Bible stance for life, something that when you're in the LDC, they emphasize all the time. All of the meetings are about Jehovah's respect for life. Safety is so important. That's why we have these safety meetings. And yet, if you need life-saving medical treatment in the form of blood, he would rather you give your life than take blood. And the reasoning that I heard that I've since adopted is like, if you treated your wedding ring as more significant than your marriage. Because what do we always say as witnesses? Blood is a symbol of life. Why would the symbol be more important than life itself? It had all come unraveling for me. And as a kid, I grew up as a kid with Crohn's disease with these fears, this constant state of anxiety. I would be told and would read stories in the publications about kids who had to take a stand for their right to refuse a blood transfusion. They have to go to court and defend themselves because they were minors, but you would just hear these stories about little 8-year-old Susie going to court and defending her right to die. And you would think of these as very valiant things when you're a witness. And now, of course, I think of them as almost ghost stories. They're horrifying. But those are the kind of stories that I had filled my head with. Those are the kind of fears that I had all the time. Those were the reasons why I couldn't sleep at night. Literally couldn't sleep at night. It got to a point where when I was in high school, I'd sleep maybe 2 hours a night because I was just up with this crippling anxiety. It was miserable. But I never made the connection that it was in any way related to my faith. If you have a problem with your faith, that's a problem with you. That's what you think as a witness. There's nothing wrong with the organization, because the organization and Jehovah are inextricable. They're the same thing. And Jehovah's perfect. And yeah, maybe it's an imperfect organization run by imperfect people. But there's nothing wrong with the doctrine. Anyway, that's just a long way to say that I never attributed my anxiety to those things. It always just seemed like, why am I so anxious all the time? I'm a witness. I have the truth. I know that if I die, I'll be resurrected. Well, of course, part of that is that you have to be a good Christian to be resurrected. And from a very young age, I discovered masturbation. I discovered the sorts of things that every young prepubescent kid thinks of, or pubescent kid, I guess. How does puberty work? Write it in the comments. And a lot of times, because I lived in just constant, I don't want to over exaggerate, but I had a lot of pain and discomfort and unpleasantness growing up with this Crohn's that was often out of control, and a lot of times that was the only way to feel anything good. But then, of course, that would be coupled with shame, and the shame would make you feel worthless, and when you feel worthless, you give in to your habits, and it's just a vicious cycle, right? So I was this person who was sick but also didn't feel worthy of everlasting life most times. Flash forward to when I had to go to the hospital and I had to have that conversation with my wife, and she was understanding. She agreed with me. She's like, I understand your reasoning. I hope you would observe my wishes as well. And so when I went into the hospital, they had in my chart that I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I told them to take it off the chart. I told them I would accept blood transfusions if needed, because I was specifically going in there because of an issue with bleeding. Now, I didn't end up needing a blood transfusion, but something clicked with me when I was in the hospital, which is that under normal circumstances, the hospital liaison committee would come in, and it would be this incredibly comforting thing to know that the brothers are by your side. How amazing is Jehovah's organization? You're sick in the hospital, there's Jehovah's servants at your side helping you and standing up for your right to die if needed. But because I had woken up, I had this entirely different perspective, which is, I don't want to die because of this. I don't agree with the reasoning. I don't think it's unscriptural to not take blood. And at this point, I'm like, I don't even know if I agree. I don't know if I care if anything's scriptural to begin with. I don't know if I believe in the scriptures. But in any other circumstance, when you, and I know this from a lot of experience, when you go to the hospital and you don't accept blood, you get a red wristband along with your regular wristband, a no blood wristband. They put no blood on the whiteboard in your room. They put it outside your door, and it's something they reiterate a lot when the nurses come in. So if an HLC person, a hospital liaison, that's how I say it, liaison committee person came in and saw that I did not have that no blood wristband, they would have asked me, oh no, they didn't give you the no blood thing. What are we going to, you want me to grab the nurse? And I would have had to say, no, I am okay with a blood transfusion if needed. I'm not like a vampire. I mean, my name is Jake, but I'm not like Jacob from Twilight. Actually, I think Jacob's the werewolf. I have not seen a Red Twilight. Anyway, I wasn't just like jonesing for some blood, but I wasn't going to say no to blood either. And had that happened, I would have been disfellowshipped, or rather disassociated. It would have been considered an act of disassociation from me being willing to accept a blood transfusion. And so in addition to me being sick, I would have had the extra pressure of the congregation coming in, visiting me, and pressuring me to say no to blood, which is the last thing when you have a disease where stress can trigger the symptoms. When I first started waking up, I really bristled at people who would call the HLC the blood police. Lloyd Evans would use that term, and I think that's not true. The HLC is there to comfort the friends, and yeah, the blood's part of it, blah, blah, blah. But when I was in the hospital and I was in a position where I might need blood, the reality set in. I mean, that's their primary function. And I will defend the elders for pastoral care, coming in and comforting you and reading you scriptures and praying. I mean, that stuff's great. It's not so great to come in and during a stressful time reiterate that, hey, if things go south, you need to be willing to die. Just a little reminder from God. He appointed us, so you should trust us too. Anyway, that was back in the summer of 2020. It is now February 2021, and I'm actually in worse shape. I'm not in the hospital because I definitely can't afford another hospital bill, and because I can't afford to miss work, and I don't really see the point in going because I didn't really feel any better afterwards last time. But the one thing that is actively, for a fact, making things worse is this horrible pressure I constantly feel. There's this tension. For the first time in my life, I feel confident in who I am, in what I believe in, what I believe is right, what I believe is wrong. I have convictions, and I don't, for the first time in my life, think that's something to be ashamed of. You know, if you had political convictions or convictions about equal rights as a witness, you know, that'd be considered taking a side. If you're taking a side with anyone other than God, then that's obviously the worst thing in the world. So this is the one thing, the witness thing. And I think the thing that was stressing me out, because my family knows how I feel, and my wife knows how I feel, and the elders know how I feel. I just haven't, you know, when they've asked for shepherding calls, I say no. And I just haven't done enough to get disassociated or disfellowshipped, and I don't feel the need to disassociate. I don't care to give the organization that much power. I don't feel like they deserve it, to be honest. I mean, whatever. And I don't think I've done anything wrong morally or spiritually, to be honest. I read the Bible a lot more now that I am not a witness. So if they want to disfellowship me because of a YouTube video, and the only way they find out about it is if somebody clicked on the YouTube video and watched it long enough to see my face, and that's on them. That's a decision that they have to make. I've made a decision to love all people, regardless of their sexuality, regardless of their gender, regardless of whether or not they give a shit about how people perceive their gender, regardless of whether or not they believe in God, regardless of what their religion is. My main contention for leaving is that I felt like witnesses don't love enough people, and that sounds new agey and pompous and lame, but it's true. If we were a more loving and accepting organization as Jehovah's Witnesses, then I would have never left. I wouldn't have had a reason to. Even if I, you know, knew deep down that the doctrines weren't right, if we weren't hurting people, then I wouldn't have a reason to leave. But we are hurting people. We're hurting anybody in the LGBTQ community. There's so many people who are forced to remain in the closet and to kill themselves because they're ashamed of who they are. Or they get disfellowshipped and they're ill-equipped to deal with life outside of the organization because you are not allowed to equip yourself for life outside the organization, and then they kill themselves. And there are people, regardless of sexuality, who kill themselves just because of shunning, because they can't deal with it. And there are people who die because they think that God wouldn't resurrect them if they accepted a blood transfusion. God's up there in heaven like, oh, you know, game show, buzzer, you accepted the wrong kind of medical procedure. You gambled away your shot for everlasting life, buddy. The cover-up of child abuse scandals. I can't, in good conscience, accept those things. So, you know, I'm okay with speaking up and saying, I think that's not cool. I think that we should love everybody. I think that we shouldn't exclude everybody. Or, I'm sorry, we shouldn't exclude anybody. And I think that we shouldn't cover up child sex abuse. Hot take. I think that's bad. And if the elders want to disfellowship me because of that, then so be it. That's fine. If my parents want to shun me because of that, so be it. If you are a family member and you've made it this far, I think what's so weird is I have felt this way my entire life. Everything you've ever known about, nothing's really changed. And I think that's what's been so weird, is the kind of dark shutters that fall over people's eyes when you say that you no longer believe that it's the truth, or that even that you're just having doubts. It is like a shade kind of crawls across the room and overtakes them, and they just can't look at you the same way. I'm the same person. I have the same morality, but my personality, my sense of humor, my, let's face it, gorgeous hair. The beard is different. That's new, but it's great. Come on, this is a good addition to the ensemble. But just because of a difference in religious belief, and yeah, people in my family want to treat me like I'm dead, then that's on them. My feelings towards them hasn't changed. I really don't care if they decide to still believe. I wish everybody had access to all the information. I wish that there wasn't the fear-mongering that the organization does about outside information. I wish they wouldn't lie. I wish they wouldn't cover things up and distort facts. I think it's bad to do that. Again, I don't like to get political on the channel, but I think distorting fact is bad. And I do like to get political on the channel. I don't know why I said that. Anyway, yeah. This is my face. I don't know what the ultimate point of the video was, really. It was self-therapy. I needed to have the confidence that I could be accepted outside of this box that I've lived in my entire life. I needed to finally take the paper bag off my head and know that the sun wasn't going to hurt me. You know, again, I'm not like one of the vampires in Twilight. I just needed to have the self-worth and self-confidence to be able to say what I really think and believe out loud. And what I believe is it's just another religion. They're wrong about pretty much everything. And I don't believe in it. And even if it was the truth, I wouldn't want any part of it. Because the sort of God that would sit in a throne and see fit to judge people because of who they love and who they want to be intimate with, and who would see fit to destroy those people, that's not a God I would want to follow, even if he was real. I would rather die at Armageddon than be unaccepting of anybody's love. So that's where I'm at. I think love is good and hate is bad, man. This is a filter. This is a tie-dye shirt I'm wearing. I just realized there's a massive pile of laundry in the background. So that rules. The wife will be super happy that that's in the video. Thanks for watching. I don't know how much, like, to the camera vlogging stuff I'm going to do in the future. I kind of like the more researched and written videos I've been doing, but you might see more of this mug out there. Like and subscribe. Bye.